To do it, Katie. I have it up.
You can go ahead and share your screen.
Allison, are you sharing your screen or am
Yep,
I? Sorry.
I'll do it.
Oh, I didn't hear.
Can everyone see that? Yes. Okay, great. Oops. All right, Katie, do you want to kick it off?
Yes. Hold on a sec. Sorry. I'm the one that's bad at technology in this relationship. Okay. Okay. So I'll just introduce myself first. My name's Katie Swanson. Technically, at this point, I am the vice president of the board of Klamath Grown. And Um, I'm one of the founders, and I'm also a vegetable farmer. My farm is Sweet Union Farm. Um, Maybe before I start, Allison, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Alison Smith. I'm the deputy director at SCOED. I've been around for about 3 years in numerous capacities. I was first a rare AmeriCorps member. So now I'm working with SCOED full time, and I'm lucky enough to continue working with Klamath Grown and just our local food system and agriculture producers. So very excited to talk about this today.
Yeah, thanks for inviting us to talk, Sydney. So yeah, I feel like Klamath Grown and then its previous form of KFOM has had a relationship with SCOED for basically since the beginning, and it's been great. So this first slide just shows this is kind of how we introduce the concept of a food hub in our community in Klamath Falls. It's a pretty new concept, and so we try to define it as best we can in a way that relates to our community. And so we break it up into economic, health, and social. Kind of here are the benefits of a food hub. Um, and so obviously SCOED is a huge part of that economic piece. Um, and that's also depending on our audience, I think as many of you know, we emphasize um, one of these three things more than the other. But our relationship with SCOED has allowed us to, um, I guess, really emphasize that economic part of a food hub to people that really care about that part. So if we're talking about to county commissioners, this economic piece is very helpful. So yeah, I'm not going to go into detail on this slide, but just kind of to show this is how we talk about food hubs in our community. Okay. So this I'll just give like a quick timeline of the history of Klamath Grown. And then we'll also kind of talk about at what points was SCOED essential. Um, and so we originally started as just an LLC called Klamath Farmers Online Marketplace that was owned by 5 farms in the community. Um, and well, I guess before that, we were a pilot project under the Blue Zones project. Um, and then decided to become our own thing. And 5 farmers went in on basically business together. And that was winter 2019 when we made that jump. And then a few months later, COVID hit, and yeah, everything grew kind of at an unsustainable pace, as I'm sure a lot of people in this Zoom room are familiar with. We were basically just all volunteering our time to make it work. Sales increased a lot, but we also weren't quite ready to handle it. And I mean, short stories, we kind of burnt ourselves out. Um, and yeah, so then we have 2020, 2021. We got over $100,000 of products sold per year. But again, this moved us way beyond what we were able to do as farmers and a few hours a week on the side. Um, and it just became completely unsustainable. Um, and so then in 22, we were kind of reassessing how to move forward. We explored different options. We decided with the help of this group and Sydney and other technical advisors, that we needed to become a nonprofit. And so we made that transition in 2022, and that's when the current version, Klamath Grown, was formed in, I guess, late 2022. And kind of on the bottom there, we have different assessments that informed our decisions along the way and really guided us. And SCOAD was a big part of a lot of those pieces. Alison, do you want to talk about those parts? Or
Sure. I was going to talk about them on the next slide. So if you want to wrap up this one, I can move on. But okay.
Yeah, I think that's it. That's just is very brief history of who we are and how we got here.
Awesome. And I'm just going to give a little bit, I feel like most people know what economic development districts are, but I'll just reiterate it at a high level for folks who may not be as familiar. So economic development districts, or EDDs, leverage involvement from private, public, nonprofit sectors to establish a strategic blueprint for economic development regionally. So EDDs are really helpful because economic development is going to look different depending on what county you're in. So Klamath County's economic development is going to look very different than Lane County's or Jackson County. And so that's where EDDs come in to try and really focus on the priorities and goals of a particular region. And in SCOAD's case, that's Klamath and Lake counties in South Central Oregon. And I do want to also point out that every economic development district is going to look very different. So some may be designated as nonprofits, or like SCOAD, we're a special district with the counties, all of which to say every EDD has different priorities and goals throughout the region. And I think that there's room for everyone to coordinate with their EDDs, but again, it's going to look a little bit different depending on where you are. And because SCOAD is designated as an EDD through the Economic Development Administration, we are required to complete something called the Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy, or the CEDS, where we kind of outline all of our region's priorities and goals and tangible like strategies and action plans to implement them. And I just wanted to kind of put two of ours on here, two of our goals, which include retention of agriculture and livestock production, or any other activity that aims to improve the natural function of an ecosystem, and also diversifying our economic base through an entrepreneurship and innovation-based economic development approach. So those are two goals in our CEDS, and I kind of want to highlight them because, you know, not that we're only assisting Klamath Grown or local food organizations solely because it says it in our strategy, but this provides leverage when our local food system organizations like Klamath Grown are looking for partnerships and funding. So again, Katie kind of talked about the timeline on the last slide, and I wanted to point out a couple places where SCOAD was able to assist. So we completed a 2019 Food Hub feasibility study that was funded by a rural business development grant that SCOAD received. And it was able to highlight the need for a food hub in our region. And then in 2020, so as Katie was talking about how KFOM went, you know, through that transition and we're thinking about becoming a nonprofit, we utilized another rural business development grant SCOAD did to help them with funding to do a branding project. So change from KFOM to Klamath Grown. So not only in name and messaging, but also the lovely icons that you'll see throughout the presentation. And then lastly, I added one thing to the timeline because it was relatively recent, but we did, SCOAD applied for a farmers market promotion program grant. So we received that in 2022, but while SCOAD received that, mostly because Klamath Grown was going through this whole process of becoming a 501c3, which I'm sure a lot of you know it takes a lot of time and effort. And so it just made sense that SCOAD could step in and help with that. And so
I'm listening
we're the recipient
to a farmer's market talking about becoming a
So we stepped in and became the recipient, but Klamath Grown is the sub-award. So SCOED is doing a lot of the grant management, reporting, budgeting, project administration type roles, but Klamath Grown is doing the boots on the ground work. So I just wanted to throw out kind of where SCOED was able to step in and help Klamath Grown, and also just the local work and businesses of farms and ranches are really important for economic development, and that's kind of why it's kind of the whole point of being an economic development district is to help them. And so they're included in that big bucket of businesses in our region that help our local economy.
Yeah, and I'll just kind of talk about, actually, will you stay on that slide for a second, Allison?
Sorry.
Just kind of how some of that happened, in case people are kind of wondering, like, how did you, I don't know. So like that food hub feasibility study in 2019. So basically the former director of SCOED was Betty Riley, and Betty and I were on the Blue Zones Food Systems Committee together. So she already had like an interest in food systems. And that feasibility study came from, for some reason, I was sitting in Betty's office and I was complaining about how we didn't know, we were trying to start this food hub thing, but I was like, I feel like I don't have all the information I need. And I don't know exactly what the actual needs are. And, I don't know how to move forward specifically. And she was like, and I had never even like heard of a feasibility study. And she was like, oh, we should just do a feasibility study. And I was like, okay. And she just applied for this rural business development grant and got it. And I feel like that was kind of the first big collaboration. And so her and Nicole Sanchez at OSU Extension and I worked on this feasibility study together, which then kind of built this foundation that we could go back to and refer to in other grant applications and say, well, according to the feasibility study, we need this, this, and this. And one of those needs was, that came up a lot with the people they interviewed, was this like having a Klamath brand for the food that comes out of Klamath, having a brand. And then that led to the next rural business development grant where we developed the Klamath Grown brand. And it just kind of went from there. But anyway, it just kind of started with being on a committee together and the relationship. And then Alison at the time, what in 2020, is that 2020, 2021?
Yep.
Was a rare AmeriCorps member. And Betty made, I think she allocated 10% of Alison's time to help us, to help KFOM. She just threw that into Alison's work plan. And that was key. That was huge. And so then we've gotten the pleasure of working with Alison for the last few years. But anyway, those are just a few of the little points along the way that were pretty major in making this all happen. Okay. Okay, so yeah, so lessons learned. So Alison and I were kind of talking about, what are the benefits of working together and what are some of the challenges? And we both really agreed that just the most important thing for an organization that doesn't have any staff yet and is all volunteer run and brand new is to find an institution that does have staff that's willing to dedicate some staff time to your cause. And again, that was having some of Alison's time as a rare member, and then her working under that institution of SCOED was huge. I mean, we wouldn't, the application, we have like horror stories of writing the FMPP grant, but truly we were like working side by side and couldn't have come even close to completing that application without Alison. Anyway, so kind of having an institution that will dedicate some time to helping you, and then, finding a champion. And so we have Alison as a champion at SCOED. And then we also have Patty Case was huge, and she's at OSU Extension. And so those two institutions offering staff time was huge, and people, that are at those institutions that really believed in what we were doing. Anyway, so that's pretty huge. And then, of course, the benefits of working together is that everybody brings different relationships they have to the table. So going all the way back to that feasibility study, at the time, Betty was like, all I need from you for this application is letters from farmers. And I was like, got it, I can do that. Klamath Grown brings those producer relationships to the table. And then SCOED brings a lot of connections and relationships. Like we've been able to just get some time to present to the commissioners because of those relationships and things like that. And then, of course, the sponsoring of the grant applications, because we're still in process of becoming our own 501c3. We need SCOED to technically be the applicant. And again, with the FMPP being a brand new organization, we really don't know what we're doing as far as like reporting and tracking and some of that like logistical grant management. The FMPP is kind of a beast. And so Alison being able to dedicate some time to that is pretty important. And then again, Klamath Grown is doing more we're doing the activities outlined in the grant. And then the other thing is again, it's important to offer that economic development perspective, especially with specific audiences. And so working with SCOED really helps us kind of add some legitimacy to what we're saying. We are supporting small food businesses in our community. Klamath Grown is a vehicle to do that. And having SCOED as a partner really helps us it provides legitimacy, I guess, to that point. And Alison provides the language, and we do presentations together, and so that can be really helpful. And then again, the rare program. So Alison was a rare member, and then when we got our own rare, Alison was on the interview committee and advised us, and was very helpful in that too. So tons of benefits. Those are just a few.
Yeah, and I'll do the challenges too, but Katie, as always, feel free to jump in. But partnerships, when it comes to challenges with this partnership, partnerships always are inherently challenging. There's a lot of moving pieces and coordination. Honestly, I can't tell you how many hours I probably just have spent trying to find a time for all of us to meet, which is, I never thought it would be that time intensive, but that's kind of the work it takes to nurture those partnerships, because everyone brings something amazing to the table, and it's important nonetheless. And with that said, there's also some constant clarification and communication pieces that we have to incorporate too. Katie might have some meetings with other producers or another nonprofit, and somehow along the way she lets them know what some FMPP work is being done, and then all of a sudden I'm not in that meeting, and I have no idea, and I need to know because it's FMPP related, and SCOED has that, and that's no one's fault. That's just how sometimes things work and how work moves along. But it's really important that each organization in the partnership intentionally carves out time for updates and to talk about that communication and just the roles associated with it. What exactly am I doing? What exactly is Katie doing? What exactly is OSU Extension doing? Really highlighting the roles is really important for the partnership, because if not, like we've learned the hard way, that if we don't highlight that, then no one really knows what they're doing and work kind of falls to the wayside. So and then I would say it's great that SCOED is here, that OSU Extension is here for Klamath Grown to help with a lot of these grant applications and programs. But applying for massive federal grants and the complexities that come along with that is always going to be challenging. And I kind of take the lens of being in a more rural area in Oregon, where SCOED is a mighty team of 4, and we don't have we don't have a full-time, and we don't even have a part-time like actual grant writer. That falls to me, which is totally fine, but there's no way that I can, I can carve out time for a lot of grant writing opportunities or even grant management. I'm sure you all have experienced this too with some capacity challenges. So it's kind of been a learning experience to go through. We just have to kind of hit the ground running if we want to get a lot of our work funded. And so while it's a challenge, the partnership has been vital. Katie mentioned Patty Case at OSU Extension, who really came in and helped us with this grant. And we kind of just all sat together and kind of learned together along the way. Not always, I don't know if I recommend that for massive grants, but that's what we had to do. That's how much we have in our capacity level. And so it can be a really big challenge. And then lastly, on that note, Patty Case was a great help during that grant process, but she's retired and living her life, which is fantastic. But that knowledge with her kind of went away. And so I feel like sometimes it's really hard when people who know a lot, especially about the community, end up retiring or leaving and taking that knowledge with them, because we have to pivot and change course, which that happens, and we'll manage, but it can be a really big challenge. Even with Betty, the former executive director, leaving, a bunch of knowledge also went with her. So it's something that we have to constantly battle with. And I know it's not on here, but the last thing I do want to say about a challenge that I'm going to kind of twist into but don't worry, is that we heard a lot of no's in the beginning. So when, SCOED first partnered with Klamath Grown and also OSU Extension, as we were developing that partnership, as we were applying for funding opportunities, we just got a lot of no's, and it was really defeating, because we were all so passionate about the work. And of course, when you're passionate about work and you hear no all the time, it's really sad. But we kept at it. We made sure the partnership was strong, and we kept concise and clear messaging about what we were all trying to do. And in the long run, somehow in 2022, that started really paying off, and we started hearing a lot of yeses. So I'll just say that you might, as you go on this journey of expanding or growing or, pivoting, you might hear a lot of no's, but it doesn't last forever. Anything else, Katie?
No, I'm glad that you brought that up. That was pretty frustrating for a while. And I think, and also I guess I would say on clarity of roles, that took us a really long time to figure out. I honestly it took me a really long time to figure out what SCOED did and what their role was. And especially when we were struggling, I was like, how can we, it's like, how can you help us here? And it was kind of unclear for a while. And yeah, so anyway, but I do think that the grants, that became a very clear, okay, this is a way that we can work together. And I will say, and you brought it up again, but including more staff time in the grant applications, even the branding project, we didn't include any of me and Kelsey's time for that, and it was pretty time intensive, and so that was a lesson learned. And then in the FMPP, we really didn't include enough of Allison's time, and so that's just over and over again, learning about grants is to make sure you include the time that you actually need. And we didn't know, we really were learning along the way. So yeah, that's a big lesson learned.
And I will say the last thing I'll say about this, because it's in the paragraph kind of on this slide, is that finding a champion, Katie kind of already mentioned that, but I will say that you might run into the fact that maybe your economic development district, agriculture or other things related to food systems, is not in one of their priorities. Again, I've mentioned that EDDs are very different. And I know some are very focused on just loans or other sort of business startup and retention. And it might not fit perfectly with what you're looking for. And I think that's okay. But I do encourage folks to try to partner with other economic development organizations in any way. There's a plethora out there. There's multiple in Klamath County and Lake County here. So I just, try to find someone, a champion or an organization that works for you, and who really understands your mission, and kind of you can intersect both missions together. I think that results in some of the highest value when you're, looking for funding or opportunities.
All right, you guys, there's a couple of questions in the chat. There was one that got people really excited, which was, do you have official partnership agreements? You talked about that tension. Have you guys documented your agreements, or are you still handshake agreeing?
I think it's mostly handshaking, except for federal grants. We have MOUs in place.
We had to do one for the FMPP. Yeah.
But it's a good point. It might be worthwhile for any project you're tackling to make sure to document the roles and responsibilities. I think it's kind of outlined in a lot of the grants that we partnership on, which is helpful. But otherwise, it's kind of just, we've built that relationship where it's a little bit more informal, and that might not work for you, but it works for us.
I feel like we should also mention, I don't know if you said this already, Alison, but Alison is also on our board. And so sometimes we'll be in a meeting and Alison will be like, I'm putting my SCOED hat on now. And then to advise you on this thing. And then she'll be like, I'm Alison now, and just Klamath Ground board member. So she's really good at kind of clarifying what hat she's wearing, which is, if anybody lives in a small town, everybody wears many hats, and you do have to just get good at saying, this is the hat I'm wearing right now.
Katie, I think that is like so important to point out that so many of us have overlapping roles, and that we have to be really clear about what role we're responding from when we're having these kinds of conversations that are hard to do, or building collaborations and partnerships that can be challenging to thread the needle on. So that's really great. We have a couple more in there. Kirsten Miller, is asking about other economic development organizations. Starting to get some answers in there, but we'd love your take, Alison.
Yeah, I'm always for starting local, and I feel like if you're curious about what economic development organizations are in your city or in your county or in your kind of regional district, first and foremost, I would go to, Oregon Economic Development District's website to see, if you don't know your economic development district, feel free to look them up. They have a map. And then there's also plenty of other resources. If you kind of just Google economic development and, in your county, your city, what have you, in Klamath and Lake counties, we have a handful of organizations, and it's, it's going to be dependent on what you're looking for. But I always, you can always start with local government and ask your county or your city about economic development organizations. They'll likely know. Or you can also talk to your Chamber of Commerce. It's a little bit different than probably what folks are looking for, but they have a lot of resources available too.
What other questions do we have for Alison and Katie?
I have maybe two comments, but one question. When I look at your economical development section, I wonder how much of those would be applicable out here in East County or in Multnomah County, because clearly in tax incentives are for motivation. And then you even have the opportunity zones that were kind of at the top of opportunities. But some of those things, some of the new incentives may be surrounding agricultural districts or rural districts and things like that. So it just depends, I guess, where you're at in the state and what you're doing will determine what you have access to, don't have access to. And the other thing was no's, or when you said I don't know if it was Katie or your partner, but when you said the no's kept coming at the beginning, it's like that's like growing up in the family. No, 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 no. And then eventually, as you kind of show a degree of maturity or sincerity, uh, but you're right. If you stick in there, which we talked about it with this organization here, that there's common threads across the industry and the sectors in any uh, movement. But that's one of the things that a lot of times you're still being tested. You know, you kind of green behind the ears or wet behind the ears. And folks, they're gonna, let's find out how serious they are after 6 months or a year or two. And evidently, you guys came through the process. So congratulations.
Thank you.
I think Willie's exactly right that, you know, it can take a while, and you'll hear some no's along the way before you either figure out how to speak the language that resonates with the folks around you, or find the right agency or organization to sell your story to. Hannah had a question. Hannah, do you want to go ahead and ask us about being a nonprofit?
Sure. Hey, I am just curious if this partnership is so awesome and vibrant, which it seems like it is, why you continued on the path to become a nonprofit. And yeah, just some thoughts around that, because it's sort of something people I've talked to go back and forth on a lot, because there's all that additional management of your own nonprofit. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, I can talk to that a little bit. So yeah, that was a really difficult decision. And actually Sydney was really helpful in helping just walk us through our different options. But I would say that things really changed once we did become a nonprofit. And things got a lot easier. It got a lot easier to find funding. And the other thing is just that our identity as an organization, it really was, we were already operating like a nonprofit. We were very mission oriented and very community based. And there was a lot of kind of beyond just operating the online market. There was a lot of like programs we wanted to implement. We wanted to increase access. We want to support producers and do all these extra things that need to be subsidized. The market can't support that. And so just as far as the identity of our organization, it just made sense to become a nonprofit, and it felt more in line with how we were operating anyway. Yes, and Sydney was very good at pointing out that if we were going to continue as an LLC, we would have to drastically raise our prices, which was a key point in us realizing we were mostly just mission driven, because we were like, our community needs this to be subsidized. We cannot raise our prices. And so that was a big turning point. And so actually that was interesting, because in some ways that almost made it a little bit harder for SCOED to work with us. I don't know if you want to speak to that, Alison, but because when we were a business, it was like, oh yeah, SCOED works with businesses. And then we were a nonprofit, and it was like, but my take has always been, we are a nonprofit that is very intentionally supporting businesses and supporting our local economy. And so there's that angle, but it also allowed us flexibility to have different angles with different audiences. And then the other thing I know, and Alison, you can probably speak to this better, logistically, it's not like SCOED could apply for all of our grants for us. Yeah. So Alison, do you want to say why? I always forget why, but
sometimes, so when I'm sure a lot of you are aware, when you're applying for either local, state, or federal grants, there's eligibility that you have to meet. And sometimes it's only catered around nonprofits. And SCOED is not a nonprofit. We do have a nonprofit arm. It's kind of different from us. It's a separate entity, but anytime that only nonprofits or like LLCs or, you know, what have you can apply for grants, SCOED cannot participate. And so there are many times where Klamath Grown does have to do that on their own or work through a fiscal sponsor. So yeah, it's really more so if public entities or, you know, pieces of local government can apply for grants, and that's when SCOED can step in and help out Klamath Grown.
Yeah, so we do have a local foundation that's actually our current fiscal sponsor for most of our grants, actually, since we technically don't have the federal 501c3 status yet. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. And now I'm kind of curious about just even the other community partner, but it sounds like you are maintaining numerous partnerships, which is awesome.
Yeah, it's just our fiscal sponsor for a lot of other stuff is the Sky Lakes Foundation, which is our local hospital, like healthcare system.
I think one of the things I want to pull out from Katie's answer and highlight for everyone was we're a nonprofit and our EDD, that makes it somewhat harder for our EDD to work with us, but understanding what your role in economic development as a nonprofit is really important. I know a lot of you are nonprofits and some of you work with EDDs and some don't. But you know, FoodWeb just received funding from Business Oregon, and they are a nonprofit. And Business Oregon, you know, does work with some nonprofits, but they're always looking for an economic development. You know, what is happening in economic development, and part of that is telling that story. Is, you know, the way we perform economic development is we offer access to these services that support entrepreneurs, and these services are accessed at below market rates, because that's how our micro entrepreneurs and the entrepreneurs in our rural area can afford to use these services. They're really important services. But really understanding, like, what does this agency need to know about what we do for them to want to work with us or to fund us or to partner on grants with us? Telling a really clear story is really important. And Katie, you told that really well. Other questions in this group? I can't see all of you. Are there any that I'm not seeing? All right. Thanks, Katie and Allison. That's super helpful. Katie and Allison also helped put together information for that resource that I dropped into the chat earlier, which I'm pretty excited about that resource. I hope you are too. All right. So our next thing on our agenda is actually, Hannah, if you want to introduce the co-packing survey and drop the link into the chat for folks to recruit. You are muted.
Cool. Thanks, Sydney. I really appreciate it. So just letting everyone know, if you don't know already, that I've been working on a project with Eric Garman at the Oregon Department of Ag around sort of assessing our contract manufacturing ecosystem and just manufacturing in general in the state, and are doing actually a lot of advocacy around community co-packing and ways that it can fold into food hubs. And we've put together a survey to assess needs and opportunities, and it's going to a lot of food businesses, contract manufacturers, farms, but I also created a thread for food hubs specifically. So would love if y'all could, if you haven't already, fill it out. You can actually take it a couple of times, like if you're a farmer and a co-packer, or a farmer and a food hub, or you know, a food maker and a food hub, I know that's maybe a bigger ask, but just they have like different needs that are highlighted and different opportunities to share. And then our whole intention around this is that we will share back data either regionally or to organizations. So thinking about applying to grants, if you want to say, hey, I'd like some data for my county or for my city, and I want to know what everybody has identified as a need around food processing in my community, we'd be happy to share back the data in any regard. So there it is to share. And thanks, Sydney, for the opportunity.
Thank you, Hannah, for sharing it with us and for keeping the Food Hub world in your mind when you're doing co-packing world stuff. We have one more question pop up for Katie and Allison about let's see, the healthcare being your partner or fiscal sponsor. This is from Kristen Penner, if you want to ask your question.
Hey, everybody. Thanks so much for that amazing presentation. I was just curious because it does feel like healthcare can be such an incredible partner in this work. And so I just wondered if you could share a little bit more about how that partnership occurred and then like coming into the role as a fiscal sponsor. Like, could you walk us through like the timeline of kind of like how that started and how it's ended you up in the circumstance where you are now?
Yeah, we're really lucky. So Klamath has its own independent hospital, which is becoming more and more rare, right? And so they're just very involved in the community, and everybody knows everybody. And so, like I said, the very, very beginning of this food hub was under the Blue Zones project, which then kind of morphed into Healthy Klamath, which is actually under the umbrella of the Sky Lakes Foundation at this point, and that's been a progression over 7 years. So we've always had a kind of strong connection with that organization, which is now under Sky Lakes. And so I think it was just kind of that relationship was there. They knew that we were struggling to apply for grants because we needed a fiscal sponsor, and we just asked them and they said yes. So we just, I think we got lucky. And Sky Lakes really has a lot of people in leadership that care a lot about the bigger picture of public health. And so we've done other little partnerships too, you know, some kind of Veggie RX type projects. So yeah, there's just kind of been that string of relationship the whole way. And this was like the most current way that they could support our work. But we can't apply for their grants because they can't be a fiscal sponsor for a grant that they are administering, which is a bummer. But yeah.
That's amazing. Thank you so much.
Any other questions? I knew this would be a hot topic, but I didn't realize it'd be such a hot topic. That's really fun to see. Thanks, Katie and Allison, really. All right. So we've got the ODA packing done. I wanted to talk about, it's the end of our farm season. We've got, you know, about 45 minutes. A lot of our hubs have like made it through their big, hot, busy season and are starting to wind down or move into like the big push for the holidays and whatnot. And I'd love to hear what you all tried this year and how that went. So if folks have projects or things that they've tried over the summer to work with their farmers, I'd love to hear it. And if we can start off, I want to hear about everything, but if we can start off with things that are like relevant to the seasonality of farming, I'd love to hear those things first. Christy, I know you've tried a lot of things, Christy Athens.
I have, but I don't have anything in mind at this moment. I have sheets on a bunch of my garden beds right now because we had a frost last night. I'm still coming off a cold, so I'm not as.
Oh yeah. I'm sorry. I put you on the spot and you like don't even have the capacity to think on the spot. That was my fault. Other things that happened through the farming season or that you tried through the farming season that worked or didn't work or worked pretty well but could work better next year. I'd love to hear what's happening out there. I just can't believe that nobody tried anything. That is such a
Well,
lie.
I can't speak to the value of a reefer van. I've just worked with ice packs and silver blankets and blasting the air conditioning for the last few years, and now I have a refrigerated van and it is superior. I recommend it.
Yeah, that's a big change.
Yeah, it's
And you
plugged in right
added
now.
some routes too, or did those get added before? Didn't you add some routes this summer too?
I did, but I pulled back on one. I added Union. So I deliver weekly in Wallowa County. And then I was going to Union County to pick up produce because we hardly have any here. And then I had the brilliant idea of, why am I driving an empty car to Union County? So I started offering to deliver in Union County once a month. So I still do that. I started picking up food in Walla Walla. So then I thought, well, I'll be ever so efficient and just do a big loop instead of 2 out and back trips. And then I would be going through Pendleton. So I started to deliver in Pendleton, but it's too much. And doing 2 mountain passes in winter would not be a good idea. So 2 different mountain passes. So the chances of one of them closing during my trip are really good. So I pulled back Union County. I pulled back Umatilla County, and I'm just doing Union County.
So you tried something and decided that worked, but it doesn't really work for your capacity.
Not yet. Yeah. I have a peach tree in my yard, and it had so many peaches on it that it was breaking its own branches. And I took that as a metaphor.
That's a good one. Other things that we tried over the last few months, new things that were tried. You guys, you have to have tried something. Really?
Okay, I've already talked too much, but I was trying to
Never talk too much.
our market manager. Maybe he's not listening. John did a lot of cool things at the market this year.
I'd love to hear about it.
Okay, I'm just gonna say it. John, you can interrupt me if you're here. So the first thing that comes to mind is actually through the Oregon Food Bank funds that you guys administered. We did a gleaning program that was a wild success. And the cool thing about it was that also we got the opportunity to get a pretty good deal on one of those display coolers, like open display coolers.
Mhm.
A business closed down and was trying to get rid of it. And so we bought it, and then everything for Klamath Grown is pre-ordered online. But what we started to use this cooler for was what we call like a la carte. And so producers have the option to put some things a la carte in the cooler so that people come in picking up their order. They might be like, oh, I should have ordered that. Let me grab that. And then what's really cool is how it worked with the gleaning program. So then the trouble with doing a la carte in the past has been that a producer drops off some fresh product, puts it in there, it doesn't sell. What do you do now? Well, all of that stuff just went to the gleaning. So the producers had the option to participate and in just the gleaning, but also if they wanted to, they could put products for the a la carte cooler, and whatever didn't sell just went to the gleaning program and got donated. And the cool thing about having funding for the gleaning program was that the producers got 80% of the retail value of that product. So it ended up being like, and as a producer myself, like a really great kind of low risk other outlet for my product. And knowing that if it didn't sell, I would get 80%, and I knew it was going to a good cause, felt really good. And so anyway, it worked well for a lot of other producers too. And it really strengthened Klamath Grown's partnership with the organization that was receiving that food, Integral Youth Services, who's distributing this food to lots of very small towns outside of Klamath. So yeah, that was a success this summer.
That's a really cool one. I see a couple of other folks. I know Teva did. It looks like some other folks did. Feed 'em Freedom did a very similar program. So that's a really cool one to see. What other new things have we tried in the last bit of time? Did anyone else try anything new this year? This summer? This fall?
Sydney, this is Jasmine from class.
Oh, good.
Hey.
Like, I know you did too.
Well, yeah, everything I did this summer was brand spanking new. So that's why I didn't really feel like I had anything to add. But I mean, just yeah, everything. Our whole hub was new, and we sold $75,000 worth of local food this summer. Which I was not expecting that. And that's just out of the hub. Our market had $120,000 worth of sales. But something that we added like halfway through the season, because we got a grant that was focused and geared towards education. So I got to hire somebody to do this as like kind of like a contract worker, but she did sample Sundays at the hub and did like little just like recipes, something that was like in abundance that week. We would really push it at the end of the week, our retail, because we're open Thursday through Sunday. So sample Sundays were a big hit, and we saw people come in, try something, and then buy that product. So that was really successful. And to compete with Costco, you know.
And it competes with Costco. I love that you did some sampling though. I think maybe not enough of us do that at our markets and whatnot. And I think that's really great that you did that. Other new stuff that happened, other things you tried this year, big or small. Doesn't have to be big. Can be small. Nobody else?
I'm going to try and do a fill your pantry event, a small one.
Ooh, really?
Just with my members. It's a beta test, but I did talk to Genevieve and a couple other people about theirs, and so I'll have a report in a few weeks. It's I'm listing everything now, and then the event is the 11th, so we'll see what happens. It will be pre-orders. It won't be like a farmer's market fill your pantry. So it's just like the same model where people order ahead, but then I implemented a harvest gathering last year, which was a sort of a celebration of producers and members. I have a membership program. Anyone can order, members get special perks. And so I'm putting those two together. And then in the future, I might make all of that available to everybody, and then the members get extra perks. But again, with the peach tree, I want to start small.
And Christy, that came out of the way you're doing it this year, came out of trying to do a member celebration and not fully loving how it worked out. And so now you're thinking of a different way to do your member celebration.
Yeah. And, we've talked in this group about the whole stay in your lane business. And in my community, there's my perception is that some people feel like my business, I'm trying to kill the farmer's market or kill the natural grocery food store, which is of course not true. And so I also got in touch with, we have this very small fresh fish. It's a challenging business model for Wallowa County, but this woman is flying in fish. But also I feel like there's been this, people feel like they need to be loyal to one or the other business. And so I got in touch with her and was like, can I do this event at your store? And then you can also have your store open, and then you'll sell stuff too. So I'm trying to make inroads, and I got a little bit of progress with the farmers market this year. Also making sure that everyone knows we're friends.
Good job. It can be hard when people show up in the same space and think there might not be enough room in it. And I know that several of our hubs have had some tensions with their local farmers markets around that issue. So and it sounds like you're all making real efforts to make friends with them. Lindsay, did you guys try anything this year? You've moved and you've done a bunch of stuff, but did you do anything with your programming this year?
We have. I might need to dip out really quickly because I do have customers. Yeah, sorry, never mind.
You take care of your people. Other folks, other new programs, new events, new things you've tried. All right.
We're doing our first seed swap event on November 4th, which looks like it's going to be a big deal in our community. So that's always a fun one.
Jasmine, you are in the middle of everything in your community, aren't you?
Yeah, I am. I was going to comment on Christy's comment, because it's funny that the farmers market thinks that you're competing, because I am the farmers market and the food hub, and I still have that they think like it's the same organization, and they still think my food hub is competing with it. And it's still all a nonprofit, all under the same umbrella, multiple vendors benefiting from the same programs, but it's still this like contention. It's hilarious. People are hilarious.
People are complicated.
Yeah.
Lindsay, did you take care of your customer?
But what's cool is that I have the data that shows like how much the food hub actually boosted the Saturday market and like elevated it, since we're like the same organization. So like vendor sharing and like bringing new vendors in that wouldn't have participated because they started vending with the food hub because it was just an easy market opportunity, and then came for our festivals and decided to stay the rest of the season at the park and the Saturday market. So I have some cool stats for that kind of growth, side by side growth of two market opportunities.
Well, Hannah beat me to the punch on that of asking, can you share that with us, Jasmine? And
Hannah always wants the data.
I think I can sense another Hub Club presentation right here, Jasmine. I'll be roping you into that shortly.
Oh no.
Oh yes.
I knew the time was coming.
It just came for you. But that's really great news, and I love hearing that you can really see how much your food hub and the farmers market coexist, not just peacefully, but that they contribute to each other's success. So that will be, I'll be excited to have you share more about that with us. All right, other things that y'all have tried or are working on, and or we can move on to burning questions. Please God, let it not involve honey. Just this one month, let's not talk about honey.
Cool thing that we were able to do so I'm the ED of Willamette Farm and Food Coalition, but I'm also a co-owner of the Whitaker Market, and so it's all the jobs. But Lane County Bounty is the food hub that is an online operator here, and we were actually able to fund something, not actually double up food bucks, but we're doing bounty bucks, and so we can provide a little bit of SNAP match for an online portal for fresh fruits and veggies. And we're able to do it with our Fill Your Pantry event. We're doing $100 of double up, which is very cool because it just really does bring, even though it's like you have to be in the position to be giving money away, it does bring so many more people, and it's just really great. I'm pretty stoked about it.
That's super exciting. And you said you were doing that with Lane County Bounty, is that correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Can you talk about what that looks like?
So Willamette Farm and Food Coalition is the funder on it.
Mm-hmm.
And so
I just get it.
Yeah, so we had some money for like a farm stand matching program for SNAP. But then Farmers Market Fund, the statewide, was piloting theirs, and so there was a little bit left over, and we decided that since ours was less restrictive, that we could get through the process of getting grocerists to accept SNAP, and then also be able to have the program do double up as well, or bounty bucks, trademark pending. But yeah, that's actually just getting announced that that's going to start like next week, but it's pretty exciting to be able to see it in practice. And wow. Yeah, we hadn't quite figured it out with like our Fill Your Pantry because we swipe SNAP in person. So we're very stoked to do $100 of it, but we don't have a clever like mechanism other than telling people on the internet that they get $100 off, and please trust us. We promise that will work when you show up. So.
Right. Twyla, did you do the Fill Your Pantry event for your organization last year?
I did not.
Oh,
We
wasn't.
had the Fill Your Pantry event in 2022. We had a Fill Your Pantry event. Well, that's not true. We had a Fill Your Pantry event early 2022, and I was not around for that.
Okay, so Caitlin did it,
Caitlin did-
and that would be the person to ask about how they did the SNAP benefits.
Right. I believe that they processed everything the same way that we processed during market, because we did process most of the payments through LFM. So Caitlin and Lila were both there to accept the payments, which probably means that they processed them the same way we do in the market, which is a $20 maximum discount at the time of purchase. So if you've purchased $40 of SNAP, you get $20 off at the time of purchase, which was adapted specifically by Oregon Food Bank for our market and Lindsay's market.
Got
So
it. Got it. I don't know if that helped you, Genevieve, or not. But there may be other folks that have done some of this in this group, so we might be able to find some resources for sorting that. But
Yeah,
as you know, SNAP is a challenge.
Yeah, that's how, I think that's pretty close to how we do it, because we also use local food marketplace for the pre-orders and then have folks process in person. But I'm excited to see that some digital retailer platform is making the move, so we don't have to do that, because
Yep. It's a thing. Other things that are happening, burning hot questions. Things you want to know from folks in this group. Did we get enough out of today? We want to say goodbye to ourselves. I wish we were in a real room together, honestly. I'd never say goodbye to all of you. Any other questions? All right, you guys, we're going to call it for this one. Our next one is another one of those like very stacked up, what do you call it? Agendas. We've got a lot of folks on the next agenda. And for those of you who did not make it to the organic conversation, the strengthening organic rule conversation, if you are selling organic products, please take the time to at least read the transcript and the notes. We've got presentation information. All of that is on our website and under our working group page in our notes folder. So it's widely accessible to you. I sent it out as well, so it also could be in your inbox. So please take the time to educate yourself. Perhaps it doesn't apply to you. Lots of good questions were asked, especially by Carrie, Josephine County. She asked a bunch of questions that would be relevant to all of you in the smaller hubs. Please, please, please just understand where you stand in relationship to that rule. Don't get caught short or by surprise. Until next time. See y'all. Thank you.